In the stillness of Cedar Hollow, the woods whispered of life and loss. Walter Grayson, a retired ranger, thought his days of saving lives were behind him. But one cold autumn morning, a cry beneath the pines called him back. What he found was a tiny, trembling bobcat, alone, frightened, and waiting for someone to choose love over fear. That morning, his quiet cabin would never be the same again. The woods of Cedar Hollow were still that morning, blanketed in silver mist that moved like breath through the trees. A distant cry, thin and sharp, cut through the quiet. Walter Grayson paused mid-step, his warm boots sinking into damp earth. Unsure if he'd heard a bird or something smaller, lost. He listened again, heart tightening as the sound returned. A faint mew hidden beneath the whispering pines. Instinct, the kind that once saved hikers and animals alike, stirred inside him. Walter followed the cry, pushing past ferns slick with dew, the cold air stinging his cheeks. At the base of a fallen cedar, he found a small bundle of trembling fur. The kitten was half buried in leaves, its paw twisted in rusted wire once meant for snares. Its blue eyes were wide with fear, its breath shallow. Walter knelt, his old knees cracking softly in the silence. "There, easy now," he murmured, his voice more to steady himself than the creature. He reached out, cutting the wire with his pocket knife, freeing the small paw. The kitten jerked, hissed weakly, then collapsed against his hand, exhausted from pain and cold. Walter slid off his flannel jacket and wrapped the little body inside, close to his chest. Through the fabric, he could feel a faint heartbeat, fragile yet determined. He rose, snow-dusted pine needles falling from his shoulders, and turned toward the distant shape of his cabin. The path home felt longer than usual. The morning fog thickened, wrapping the world in quiet grey. Walter could hear the kitten's uneven breathing, a fragile rhythm that made him quicken his pace. Somewhere deep inside, a memory stirred another small heartbeat, another loss he never spoke of. By the time he reached the porch, his breath formed pale clouds. The door creaked open, and Evelyn appeared, her hands still dusted with flour from baking. Her eyes widened when she saw the bundle in his arms. "Walter, what on earth?" she whispered. He laid the jacket on the kitchen table, unfolding it carefully. The kitten shivered, blinking up at the warm light spilling from the fireplace. Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest, caught between fear and pity. "It's a bobcat," she breathed, her voice trembling. Walter nodded slowly. "Found him tangled in wire near the creek. If I'd left him there." His voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish. Evelyn fetched an old towel, wrapping it gently around the kitten, as if the act itself could chase away death. Ash, that name would come later, but already it suited him, let out a weak sound that might have been a purr or a sigh. The scent of cinnamon and smoke filled the cabin. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, while inside, the little bobcat began to dream beside the fire. For the first time in years, Walter sat near the hearth without feeling the weight of his loneliness. He watched the flames dance across Evelyn's face and the faint rise and fall of the kitten's chest. The wilderness had sent him something wild, and something he didn't know he still needed. As the storm deepened outside, the three of them stayed by the fire. The old clock ticked, marking each second of fragile peace. Walter leaned back, eyes heavy, whispering to the tiny creature sleeping in his jacket. "You're safe now, little one. You're home." With saying, the storm had passed by morning, leaving the forest outside glazed in ice and quiet. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of coffee, pine smoke, and fresh bread. The bobcat kitten still slept by the fireplace, curled in a towel, tiny chest rising and falling like the ticking of a clock. Evelyn knelt beside him, her grey hair loose from its braid, studying the small creature. His ears twitched with each crackle of fire, and his paw flexed as if chasing something in a dream. There was strength even in his fragility, something ancient and untamed, still whispering beneath the fur. When he stirred, she placed a shallow bowl of warm milk nearby. The kitten sniffed, uncertain, then dipped his tongue awkwardly, splashing drops across the wooden floor. Evelyn laughed softly, startled by the sound of her own joy. It had been so long since the cabin heard laughter. Walter watched from his chair, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "He's a fighter," he murmured. Evelyn nodded, eyes still on the kitten. "Fighters deserve names," she replied. They both fell silent, the kind of silence filled with thought and memory. The kitten yawned, revealing needle-sharp teeth, then blinked up at them with sleepy blue eyes. Ashes from the fire drifted upward, swirling in the golden light. "Ash," Evelyn said suddenly. "His fur looks like smoke and embers." Walter smiled. "Ash," he repeated. "Yeah, that fits." From that moment, he was no longer just a stray rescued from the woods. He was Ash, the newest heartbeat in a house that had forgotten what warmth felt like. Every sound, the rustle of the fire, the soft patter of paws, seemed to pull the home gently back to life. Later that day, Walter carried Ash to a small crate lined with old quilts near the hearth. The kitten sniffed, turned in a circle, and collapsed into a ball of fur. Evelyn laid a hand on Walter's arm. "It's been years since we had anything this small here," she whispered. That evening, as the sun dipped below the frosted trees, Walter sat sharpening his old knife at the table. Across the room, Ash batted at a loose thread on Evelyn's rug, clumsy but determined. Each movement drew a faint smile from Walter, a man who had long stopped smiling at all. When night fell, the wind moaned softly outside, carrying the scent of snow through the cracks in the cabin walls. Evelyn draped another log onto the fire, and the flames brightened, painting the room in amber hues. Ash's shadow flickered against the wall, larger than life. For a long while, the couple simply watched him play. Walter's thoughts wandered to the traps he had once set, the things he had taken from the wild. Now, life had brought something back small, wild, and utterly dependent on his care. It felt almost like redemption. Ash finally tired, climbing into the old basket again, paws twitching in sleep. The rhythm of his breathing filled the silence between the ticking clock and the crackling fire. Evelyn leaned against Walter's shoulder, whispering, "Maybe we needed him as much as he needed us." Walter nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the kitten. The fire's reflection glowed in Ash's fur, a soft shimmer of gold and grey. Outside, the night deepened, but inside, something fragile and new had taken root. Hope, flickering quietly in the heart of their little home. The next morning brought thin sunlight through frosted windows and the scent of fresh coffee. Ash stirred under the quilt, blinking at the soft glow. He stretched, claws curling, then froze as a deep bark echoed from the corner of the room. Patch, the old golden dog, sat near the door, his head tilted, eyes wary. The sight of the bobcat stirred something ancient in him, caution mixed with curiosity. Ash arched his back, fur puffing up, a wild hiss breaking the calm of the morning. Evelyn stepped in quickly, her voice soft but firm. Easy now. She set down 2 bowls, one of milk and one of dog food. Ash's nose twitched, the scent drawing him closer, but Patch's growl rumbled low, a warning wrapped in habit. The small cabin suddenly felt smaller. From the windowsill, Muffin, the old grey cat, watched with narrowed eyes. His tail flicked like a metronome of disapproval. He had ruled this cabin for 14 years and had no patience for a scruffy stranger with tufted ears and forest scent. Ash crouched, muscles trembling. His instincts whispered to fight, to prove himself. Yet something in Evelyn's tone made him hesitate. She reached out a slow hand, placing it gently on Patch's neck. The dog exhaled, lowering his head, uneasy but listening. Across the room, Luna, the young silver kitten, peered from behind a chair. Her eyes were bright with curiosity. She took one daring step, then another, until her tiny nose nearly touched Ash's. He blinked, confused by this fearless little creature, who smelled of home. For a heartbeat, the cabin went utterly still. Then Luna batted at Ash's ear and darted away, tail high. Ash froze, unsure if it was a challenge or an invitation. When Evelyn laughed, the sound light and kind, he relaxed just enough to take a step forward. Walter entered from the porch, wiping snow from his boots. "How's our guest?" he asked. Evelyn smiled faintly, learning the rules. Walter knelt, eye level with the bobcat. "We'll take it slow," he murmured. "He's not wild anymore, not exactly tame either." Later, as twilight deepened, Ash explored the cabin on cautious paws. Every creak of wood made his ears twitch. The smell of pine sap, fabric, and fire smoke filled his nose. He rubbed his cheek against the leg of a chair, marking it quietly as his own. When he wandered too close to Patch's blanket, the dog lifted his head and grumbled. Ash froze, then backed away, tail low. Muffin's stare followed him, unreadable but watchful. In this new world of warmth, Ash was still learning the invisible borders of belonging. That night, Evelyn spread another quilt near the fire. Ash crept onto it, circling twice before curling into a ball. The others slept at a distance. Patch by the door, Muffin on the windowsill, Luna tucked against Evelyn's feet. They were strangers sharing the same roof, waiting for trust to grow. As the fire crackled softly, Ash's ears twitched to the rhythm of the house, the sigh of wind outside, the heartbeat of life within. For the first time since the forest, he closed his eyes without fear, carried into sleep by warmth he did not yet understand. Ash woke before dawn, the first streaks of light cutting across the wooden floor. He stretched, yawned, and padded quietly toward the kitchen. The smell of breakfast, fresh bread, and sizzling eggs filled the air, pulling his curiosity like a string. Evelyn stood at the stove humming, unaware of her silent observer. Ash leapt onto the counter, landing near a loaf of cooling bread. Her startled gasp made him freeze mid-step. "Ash," she said, half laughing, half scolding. "That's not for you." He blinked, tail twitching. From his spot near the fireplace, Walter lowered his newspaper, smiling. "Looks like someone's testing boundaries." Evelyn sighed, brushing flour from her hands. "He's learning." Ash tilted his head, not knowing what the word meant, but sensing its warmth. After breakfast, Luna pounced at him from behind a chair. Ash jumped back, startled, then hissed, claws flashing. The kitten darted away, unfazed. Patch barked once, warning him to stay calm. Ash crouched low, embarrassed by his wild reaction to play. Later that day, Walter opened the back door to let in sunlight. Ash approached cautiously, peering at the vast stretch of white snow beyond the porch. He sniffed the air, memories of trees and wind tugging at his instincts. Walter watched quietly, then closed the door. Not yet. Evelyn placed a small red ball on the rug. Ash stared, unsure what to do. Luna rolled it with her paw, chirping softly. He mimicked her clumsily, batting it once, then twice. When it rolled beneath the couch, he dove after it, bumping his head. Evelyn laughed until tears filled her eyes. That evening, Walter brought him firewood while Patch trotted beside him. Ash followed, carrying a small stick in his mouth, proud as a hunter. Evelyn caught the moment and smiled. "He wants to help," she said. Walter chuckled. "Or he's just showing off." As night fell, the family gathered near the fire. Muffin lounged on the armchair, pretending not to watch, while Luna curled near Ash's side. The bobcat blinked slowly, uncertain but comforted by the closeness of others. His wildness softened in the steady rhythm of the room. When Evelyn began knitting, the flicker of yarn caught Ash's attention. He crept closer, pawed at the thread, then tugged with sudden excitement. Yarn unravelled across the floor in a wild red trail. "Ash!" Evelyn gasped, but her scolding melted into laughter as he rolled in it like a cub. Later, Walter cleaned the hearth while Ash sat watching, head tilted, eyes reflecting firelight. The man spoke softly, as though to himself. "You're getting the hang of this, aren't you?" The bobcat's ears flicked at his tone, and he let out a low, rumbling purr. Before bed, Evelyn placed a fresh blanket by the hearth. Ash circled twice and settled, his tail curling over his nose. The house was quiet except for the crackle of fire and the distant call of the wind. For the first time, this wild creature truly looked at peace. As the flames dimmed, Evelyn whispered, "Good night, Ash." His ear twitched at her voice. In his dream, he was running through the forest again, but this time, when he stopped, the warm light of the cabin glowed between the trees, waiting for him to come home. Outside, the night deepened, but inside, something fragile and new had taken root. Hope, flickering quietly in the heart of their little home. Winter settled deep around Cedar Hollow, pressing silence against the windows. Inside the cabin, Ash had grown stronger, his once thin frame now sleek with muscle. He ruled the hearth, a small king of warmth and firelight, unaware that his world was about to be challenged. One frosty afternoon, a distant knock broke the quiet. Patch barked once, low and uncertain. Evelyn wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door to a man in a forest green jacket, snow clinging to his boots. "Ma'am," he said politely, flashing a silver badge. "Agent Henry Cole, Wildlife Bureau." Walter appeared behind her, his expression cautious. "Something wrong, Agent?" The man stepped inside, removing his gloves. "Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together." Walter crossed his arms, the years in his posture steady but tense. "Found him injured last fall, saved his life. He's never harmed a thing." Cole nodded, still watching the bobcat. "Wild things don't always mean harm," he said, "but the law doesn't always understand that." Ash rose, padding toward the agent. Walter held his breath. The bobcat stopped inches away, sniffed the man's boot, and then rubbed his head lightly against it. Cole blinked, stunned. "Well," he said with a faint smile, "that's not exactly standard behavior." For a long moment, no one spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. Then Cole sighed, pulling a card from his pocket and setting it on the table. "If anyone asks, tell them I checked. Officially, I saw nothing." He looked up. "But be careful. Not everyone will look away." After he left, Evelyn closed the door, her hands shaking slightly. "Do you think he'll tell?" she whispered. Walter placed a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said. "He's seen enough to know what matters." Ash circled their legs, brushing against them both, unaware of the danger that had passed. That evening, the air outside grew heavy with snow again. Ash lay near the window, watching flakes drift through the orange glow of sunset. The world beyond the glass called to him, faint and cold, but the warmth behind him, the voices, the laughter, kept him still. Walter sat beside the fire, lost in thought. "We did the right thing," Evelyn said quietly. He nodded. "Sometimes doing right means breaking a few rules." Ash blinked slowly, as if agreeing. For the first time, he understood that the home he'd found was something worth protecting. When the fire dimmed and the house fell silent, Ash lifted his head, ears pricked toward the door. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, its voice echoing through the forest. Ash's eyes softened, torn between the wild outside and the love that waited by the hearth. The wind rose before dawn, a low howl slipping through the cedar trees. Ash lifted his head from the rug, ears twitching. Outside, snow was falling hard, the flakes thick and relentless. The cabin walls creaked as though the forest itself was breathing. By mid-morning, the windows had turned to white. Evelyn stoked the fire, her brow creased with worry. "It's getting worse," she murmured. Walter checked the radio, but static answered. Ash sat by the door, restless, tail flicking at every sound the storm delivered. Patch paced the floor, whining softly. He could sense what the humans could not, The faint cry carried on the wind, something small and frightened out there in the snow. When Walter opened the door to listen, the gust nearly tore it from his grip. Ash darted forward before anyone could stop him. A grey streak vanished into the swirling white. "Ash!" Evelyn shouted. But her voice was swallowed by the storm. Patch barked once, then bolted after the bobcat, leaving nothing but paw prints that filled instantly with snow. Walter grabbed his coat, his heart pounding. "Stay here," he told Evelyn, though his own voice trembled. Outside, the world had vanished into a blur of snow and sound. The storm clawed at his face as he stumbled through drifts, calling their names. Ash could barely see ahead, guided only by instinct and the faint scent of the dog. The wind bit through his fur, but he pressed on, low to the ground, ears pinned. He found Patch near a fallen branch, trapped halfway in a snowbank, shivering violently. The dog whined, unable to move. Ash crouched beside him, licking his muzzle, then pressed his body against him to share warmth. His wild heart beat fast, but not from fear, from purpose. Together, they waited as the snow piled higher around them. Walter's lantern beam flickered through the trees, dim against the white wall of wind. He almost missed them, two shapes curled together, one golden, one grey. "There," he gasped, falling to his knees beside them. Ash blinked up, half buried, his fur coated in frost. He lifted Patch gently, wrapping the dog in his jacket, then turned to Ash. The bobcat followed without hesitation, staggering but unyielding. Step by step, they fought their way back to the faint glow of the cabin window, cutting through the blizzard. When they reached the porch, Evelyn threw open the door, tears of relief freezing on her cheeks. She took Patch into her arms, while Walter guided Ash inside. The bobcat collapsed near the hearth, steam rising from his wet fur as the fire thawed the chill from his body. Evelyn knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she dried his coat with a towel. "You saved him," she whispered. Ash lifted his head weakly, meeting her eyes with quiet understanding. He didn't need words, his loyalty was written in every scar, every breath. That night, the storm raged on, but the cabin glowed with warmth and gratitude. Patch slept soundly by the fire, his head resting on Ash's paw. Walter watched them both, voice soft as the wind outside. "Looks like the wild found its heart after all," he said. Spring thaw came slow to Cedar Hollow. The snow retreated into the shadows of trees, and the sound of dripping water filled the air. Ash roamed near the porch, his paws leaving prints in the damp soil. The forest called to him with the scent of life returning. Evelyn watched from the doorway, holding a broom loosely in her hands. "He's restless again," she said quietly. Walter nodded. "He remembers." They had grown used to this rhythm, Ash testing the border between safety and the wild world that had once hurt him. One afternoon, a truck engine broke the peace. A stranger stepped out, camera slung over his shoulder. His name was Edgar Finn, a hunter turned collector of stories. He had heard rumors of a tame bobcat living with an old ranger and came to see it for himself. Ash stood by the window as the man approached, eyes narrow, tail flicking. Evelyn met Edgar on the porch, uneasy. "You'll have to leave," she said firmly. He smiled, polite but cold. "I just want a picture." She shook her head. "He's not a spectacle. He's family." That night, when Walter returned from chopping wood, he found muddy footprints by the side fence. The latch hung open. Ash was still inside, but something in his stare had changed wariness mixed with memory. The scent of the stranger clung to the air. In the following days, Walter reinforced the fence while Ash prowled along it, muscles tense. His instincts hummed with confusion. He belonged to the warmth inside the cabin. Yet every gust of wind carried the pull of pine and earth, something older, wilder, deeper. Edgar came back a week later, parking farther down the road. Through binoculars, he watched Ash leap across the yard, capturing the moment with a click of his camera. The flash was faint, but the sound sliced the quiet. Ash spun, ears pinned, teeth bared. Inside, Patch barked, sensing the shift. Walter stepped onto the porch and spotted movement in the trees. "Go!" he shouted. The figure vanished into the brush, snow crunching beneath his boots. Ash stood trembling, torn between fear and fury. That evening, Evelyn found Ash pacing by the window. "He's scared," she said softly. Walter nodded, his jaw tight. "He's not the only one." He sat by the fire, staring at the flames, the light flickering across the old scars on his hands. "Maybe it's time," he whispered. Later, when the house grew quiet, Walter opened the door. Cold air swept in, filled with the scent of rain and moss. Ash stepped forward, paused on the threshold. The forest loomed before him, dark but familiar. "If you need to go," Walter murmured, "we'll understand." Ash didn't move for a long while. He looked from the trees to the fire behind him, from the memory of hunger to the warmth of belonging. The wind carried both worlds across his fur, and for a heartbeat he seemed to stand in two places at once. Evelyn came beside Walter, her hand finding his. "He'll choose," she said quietly. And as the night deepened, the bobcat turned from the forest, padding back inside to rest by the fire. For now, at least, love still outweighed the cool of the wild. Dawn crept over Cedar Hollow, painting the forest in silver mist. The cabin stood quiet, the fire long since gone cold. Ash was restless again, pacing near the window, his tail flicking like a heartbeat. Beyond the glass, the woods called to him in whispers. Evelyn stirred from her chair, knitting still in her lap. "He's been like this all night," she murmured. Walter rubbed his eyes, watching the bobcat's silhouette against the pale light. "He feels the change," he said softly. "Spring's pulling him back to where he came from." Ash moved toward the door as if drawn by something unseen. Walter hesitated, but then unlatched it. Cold air swept in, carrying scents of pine and thawing earth. Ash paused on the porch, ears twitching, eyes fixed on the tree line that shimmered like memory. He stepped off the porch and into the grass, paws sinking into the dew. The morning fog wrapped around him like a veil. Evelyn's voice followed, quiet and breaking. "Come back, Ash." But he was already gone, vanishing into the forest that had once nearly killed him. The day stretched on without him. Evelyn left food by the door, untouched. Patch lay by the hearth, whimpering, now and then. Walter tried to read, but found himself staring at the same page, his mind filled with images of a grey shape lost among the trees. Night came heavy with rain. Evelyn stood by the window, her reflection pale against the glass. "Maybe he won't come back," she whispered. Walter placed a hand on her shoulder. "If he belongs there, we can't stop him. You can't cage something that was born free." The next morning, the world felt hollow. The forest seemed too quiet, as if holding its breath. Evelyn carried a bowl of milk to the porch, her hope dimming. Then she froze a trail of paw prints in the mud, leading from the trees straight toward the cabin. Ash appeared at the edge of the yard, soaked and shivering. His fur was tangled with leaves, one ear nicked from a fight. Between his teeth, he carried a limp rabbit, placing it gently on the doorstep before collapsing onto the wet boards. Exhausted, but proud, Evelyn knelt beside him, tears spilling freely. "You came home," she whispered. Ash blinked slowly, pressing his head against her knee. His wildness was still there, sharp, alive, but now it lived beside something softer, something deeply human. Walter joined them, covering the bobcat with a blanket. "Guess the forest didn't win after all," he said, voice rough with relief. Ash lifted his gaze toward him, the fire of the woods reflected in his eyes, now mixed with warmth and belonging. That evening, the rabbit was gone, buried beneath the old oak by the garden. Ash slept near the fire, twitching softly in dreams. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper, and the forest watched from the shadows, no longer his master but his memory. For the first time, Walter and Evelyn realized the truth. Not every rescue is about saving. Sometimes it's about letting something wild choose to stay. As the firelight flickered across his fur, Ash breathed deeply. Home again, but never truly tame. Spring warmed the valley, and Cedar Hollow awoke with the hum of life. Ash watched the forest through the open window, his fur shining in the sunlight. He had grown stronger, broader, his eyes older, now caught between instinct and belonging. Walter sat by the porch mending a fishing net, his hands slow but steady. He looked at the bobcat near the steps. "You still think about it, don't you?" he said softly. Ash flicked his tail, but didn't look back. The breeze carried the smell of pine and distant rain. That afternoon, the hum of an engine echoed down the old road. Evelyn looked up from her knitting as a familiar truck appeared. Agent Henry Cole stepped out, removing his hat. "Afternoon, folks," he said kindly. "Mind if I come in?" Inside, Cole's tone was gentle but deliberate. "A new policy's come through," he explained. "If you'd like, we can relocate him to the state sanctuary. He'd be safe there, fed, cared for." The words hung heavy between them, like the slow ticking of the clock. Evelyn's eyes found Ash by the window. "Safe," she repeated quietly, "but not free." Cole sighed. "You've done right by him, ma'am. But one day, someone else might not look the other way." Walter's jaw tightened, his heart split by fear and affection. Ash turned, watching their voices move like distant thunder. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the pull something shifting in the air. Walter opened the door. The breeze rolled through, carrying 1,000 scents, everyone familiar and dangerous. Let him decide, Walter said finally. He's earned that much. Cole nodded silently. Evelyn's eyes shimmered as she whispered, "Go on, Ash." The bobcat stepped forward, his paws silent on the wooden floor, every movement both wild and human. Outside, the forest glowed gold in the late sun. Ash stopped at the edge of the yard, the line that had always divided his two worlds. He looked back once. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her chest. Walter's shadow stretched beside her, steady and still. A bird called from deep within the woods, and Ash's ears twitched. He could run, now vanish like smoke between the trees, return to the wild heartbeat that had raised him. For a long moment, no one breathed. The world held its breath with them. Then Ash turned. Slowly, deliberately, he walked back toward the cabin. The sound of his paws on the porch boards was soft but certain. Evelyn knelt as he brushed against her arm, his fur warm and familiar. "He's home," she whispered through tears. Cole smiled faintly, tipping his hat. "Well, I guess that's that," he said, stepping out into the fading light. Walter closed the door behind him, the wind dying into silence. The bobcat curled beside the fire, eyes half open, the glow painting his fur in amber peace. As night fell, Walter whispered to Evelyn, "Maybe we saved each other." She nodded, watching Ash breathe, his chest rising with the rhythm of the flames. Outside, the forest slept. Inside, the wild had chosen, quietly, freely, and forever. Summer came gently to Cedar Hollow. The pines glimmered in soft wind, and the old cabin settled deeper into its rhythm. Ash slept by the window, his fur rippling in the sun. He had grown into a magnificent creature, broad-shouldered, calm, and wise. Walter tended the garden, moving slower now, his back stooped but steady. Every so often, Ash padded out to sit beside him, watching the butterflies drift between flowers. They spoke in silence, two old souls sharing a language made of trust. Evelyn spent her mornings near the fire, though she no longer needed its heat. Habit, she called it the warmth she could not live without. Ash would stretch across the hearth, his tail flicking lazily as she hummed the same song she once sang when he was small. Neighbors came and went, curious about the old couple with the bobcat. Some took photos, others just smiled and waved. Walter never explained much. "He's family," he'd say simply, and Ash, lounging nearby, would blink slowly as if to agree. One crisp autumn morning, Walter left early for the woods, his lantern swinging softly in the fog. Ash followed, silent and sure-footed. Together they walked the same trail where their story had begun, where the first cry had broken the stillness years ago. At the clearing, Walter stopped to rest, sitting on a fallen log. "You remember this place, don't you?" he said. Ash looked up at him, ears twitching. A breeze stirred the leaves. The bond between man and beast needed no words, it was written in the quiet. That winter, the fire burned longer each night. Walter's hands had grown thin, the skin mapped with time. Sometimes he'd doze in his chair, the sound of Ash's purr mingling with the ticking clock. Evelyn would smile softly, knitting by the fading glow. When the first snow fell, Evelyn found Ash sitting by Walter's empty chair. The old ranger had passed quietly in his sleep, the fire still warm beside him. Ash did not move for hours, his eyes fixed on the man who had once carried him through the storm. Days turned to weeks. The house felt larger, quieter. Evelyn spoke to Ash as though to a person, telling him stories, memories, prayers. He stayed close to her side, guarding the woman who had given him gentleness when the world had none. One evening, as snow drifted past the window, Evelyn sat by the hearth, her knitting resting in her lap. Ash lay across her feet, his breath deep and steady. She reached down, stroking his fur. "We did good, didn't we?" she whispered. "We kept the fire burning." Spring came again, soft and patient. The cabin remained, the garden alive with blooms. Inside, the fireplace still glowed faintly at dusk, and there, curled in eternal calm, Ash slept on the rug, the last ember of a love wild enough to last forever. For the first time, Walter and Evelyn realized the truth. Not every rescue is about saving. Sometimes it's about letting something wild choose to stay. As the firelight flickered across his fur, Ash breathed deeply. Home again, but never truly tame. If this story touched your heart, just drop a 1 in the comments, or a 0 if it stayed quiet inside you. Don't forget to subscribe. There are more gentle stories waiting just beyond the trees.